Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he is willing to send a delegation to discuss the latest ceasefire proposals over the war in Gaza. Hamas leaders tonight said they accept the plans brokered by Egypt and Qatar, which is believed could involve the exchange of Palestinian prisoners for 33 Israeli hostages held since the October the 7th attacks. A ceasefire would be welcome respite for many tens of thousands of Palestinians sheltering in southern Gaza and would be the first pause in the 7-month war since a week-long truce back in November. But Israel has been making plans for a full-scale attack on the southern city of Rafah and tonight continued to bomb the area. 100,000 refugees have been told to move to what Israel is calling an expanded humanitarian zone near Khan Yunis. But Gazans say the area is already overcrowded. Fergal Keane has more details.
They haven't had reason to dance for a long time, but they haven't forgotten how. Even amid uncertainty about Israel's position, hope springs. Across Gaza, BBC journalists captured the reaction of those convinced, perhaps prematurely, that a ceasefire will happen.
The feeling is indescribable. We're so happy we're going back to our home in Gaza City.
We're refugees from the north and we fled here, this young man says. We're so happy there's a ceasefire. Israelis are still absorbing the news. It came late on one of this society's most important days, when across the country sirens bring the nation to a halt in memory of the dead of the Holocaust. A day of reflection in a country traumatized by the Hamas attack last October. Tonight on the streets of Tel Aviv, those who believe healing that trauma can begin with a ceasefire deal and the release of Israel's hostages.
We expect from the Israeli government to take this deal to save all the remaining hostages who are still alive.
But after 7 months of a war in which Israel's army pledged to destroy Hamas, a ceasefire deal that fails to accomplish that risks breaking Israel's wartime coalition government. Israel will send negotiators to talks but won't stop fighting yet.
We examine every proposal very seriously, and we review every possibility on the issue of negotiations and the return of the hostages to their homes as quickly as possible and as a central task. At the same time, we carry on with our operations in the Gaza Strip and will continue to do so.
This morning, the people of eastern Rafah woke to leaflets telling them to evacuate. Many have been displaced before, but still they were told to leave. Everyone, no matter how old, how young, or how vulnerable.
ومعنا صغارنا واطفالنا ومرتي وامي والعيله وكلنا والله ما احنا عارفين نروح مش عارفين وين نروح.
To Al-Mawasi, Israel says, and other desolate places beyond Rafah. The so-called humanitarian zones were to be expanded, but they've never been safe from sickness, hunger, or war. This is the aftermath of raids on Rafah last night. People hope these may have been some of the last airstrikes if the ceasefire can be made to work. News of the Hamas announcement was still hours away. Nisreen Raja, mother and refugee. For 7 months, this has been the daily reality. Hani Ashtar, an orphan, grieved by his relative Reem. His family was killed during the war, she says. Even he was killed. So many here are grieving and exhausted. Late tonight, Israel attacked eastern Rafah, where they told people to leave. Celebration had turned to fear, and the hope that tomorrow might bring peace. Fergal, Keane, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Let's get the very latest now from Frank Gardner, who's live in Jerusalem, and Gary O'Donoghue, who's in New York. Frank, first to you. As we speak, Israel still hasn't signed on to this deal.
No, they haven't, but they have at least agreed to do what they didn't do at the weekend, which is to send a delegation of mediators, experts in their view, to try and thrash out a deal. They've said that the terms that Hamas have agreed to are very far from what meets their needs, but they're not ruling it out. So I think there is a degree of optimism here. But at the same time, as I mentioned, they are continuing their push, their military push, against the wishes of the Americans in Rafah. And that is controversial because all the aid agencies are saying this could be a catastrophic result for the civilians there. And essentially, I think if you had to sum up the Israeli position, it would be keep talking, but keep fighting.
All right, Frank, thank you. To you, Gary, at the White House. Joe Biden, his team, they're very anxious over Israel's planned attack on Rafah. They don't want it to go ahead, but Israel, it's clear tonight, is still planning to push on.
Yeah, the administration here believing we're at a really critical stage in this whole process. They are saying that they're looking at the details of the deal that Hamas have said they'll accept, talking to their partners in the region, and also, of course, the CIA director, Bill Burns, is shuttling between Qatar and Cairo, trying to work out what to do next. Now, they're saying that they're going to look at that in great detail. One thing they're being very clear on is the question of Rafah. They say they've seen no credible plan of how to protect humanitarian needs in Rafah if there were any kind of incursion there. They've been opposed to that all along. And I think one thing today from the National Security Council spokesman, Clive, John Kirby, sums it out. He said, "I don't think there has been a more sensitive stage than right now."